Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight I'm proud to bring you Sword and Sandal Cinema. We have on tonight Michael Del Russi and Setna of Khemet. Greetings, gentlemen. How are you?
Very well,
Well,
thank
good,
you.
very good.
I'm glad to hear that, and I'm looking forward to speaking with both of you. It's been a while. Setna, it's been ages since we last spoke.
About what, 2 hours?
And with Michael, too. Michael, it's been ages.
Yes, we spoke earlier today.
Um, I'm going to go last today with the movie I'm sharing, and I guess we'll start with Michael Del Russi.
Well, I'm not discussing any one specific film today. What I would like to do is share briefly what Sword and Sandal Cinema has done for my life, specifically during the decade of the 60s. The last few programs that I participated in, I think it's very important for me to emphasize what I feel has been a major impact that Sword and Sandal Cinema has made not only on my generation, but on generations that came after me. So for me, I mean, the heroes of that era, specifically decade of the 60s, meant so much, especially with the chaotic world that we were dealing with outside. Those heroes awakened us to the possibilities that we had as heroes inside of us as well. I think that's why practically all of my fellow students in school, regardless of their differences in how they were raised, were in terms of the spiritual life, were drawn to Greek mythology. Greek mythology was always one of the most popular courses in school when I went to school. When you're a teenager and you're raised in a Catholic denomination, which is what I was raised in, Italian Catholic denomination, it was mandatory, and we respected that. But the spirits were not stirred at that time, not the way spirituality affects me today. At that time, you're a teenager. You did what you had to do. You did what you thought was respectful. But my spirit was not stirred by religion at that point in my life. I might have been 16, 17. But the decades of Sword and Sandal and the heroes of Greek mythology changed all that. We were motivated to look to the sky with awe and wonder. It was both a mystical wonder and an influence as far as actual physical transformation. They were now available to us. It was a whole different experience. Swords and Sandal offered us that. Steve Reeves, Mark Forrest, Brad Harris, Reg Park, Gordon Scott, Gordon Mitchell, Reg Lewis, the list goes on, many others. They influenced my generation, not only my generation, but the generations to come, specifically as we moved from the 70s into the 80s. Both old and young people would visualize a new look, a new physicality, and they looked with awe to the myths that the Greeks brought to us. And for us, for me and my brother specifically, we looked at the universe in ways that we hadn't previous to this. All we knew was tradition, the tradition that our parents and our forefathers brought to us in terms of traditional religion. To the point, to me, with Sword and Sandals, it brought so much more than just heroes with swords in their hands. They influenced us both spiritually, mystically, and physically. For the first time, we realized we could actually change the look of our bodies. And while here in America anyway, my gym teachers, my physical fitness instructors kind of looked down on weight training at that time. They couldn't stop the momentum. It was a whole new process, a whole new era. And gradually, that athletic look, that classical athletic look, everybody wanted to know about it. Everybody wanted to know how to achieve it. You know, I think Europe was ahead of us in that, and even the Soviet Union at that time. and you probably remember this, they're athletes, all engaged in weight training. Yes, there were drugs involved as well, but they saw the value in strength training and the value of that look. So sword and sandal, to me, the sword and sandal phenomenon, it was more than just watching heroes with bodies that we thought at that time we could never achieve. It was more than anything we could have ever imagined. It had a whole new impact as far as not only our third dimensional existence, but we looked with awe, even as we gotten older into our adult years. We grew older. We looked with awe at what these myths brought to us. So for me and my associates, if you will, it was a whole new experience, an experience that no other form of entertainment actually brought to us. It was a spiritual growth as well as, hey, we can do something with our bodies we didn't think we could do. And that's when, of course, during that era, bodybuilding began to grow and become more popular. Late 50s into the 60s, and by the 70s, yes, it was still considered an underground sport by many, but they couldn't stop the momentum. And then as we moved into the 80s, these great heroes of sword and sandal, now everybody turned, they want to know about them. The new age of bodybuilders, Arnold and Lou, they were all influenced by these early heroes of sword and sandal films during that time. So these are the points I wanted to emphasize, that sword and sandal brought us so much more than just classical adventure and what have you, and mystical creatures, and it brought us great heroes and great images that I think changed our society in terms of our young people that were athletic, what they want to achieve, and most of all, what they wanted to look like. And those are the points I wanted to drive home today. And before I turn it over to our fellow guests, because I think there was such an impact in our society by those films and these heroes, it should be discussed more by the media at large, if you will. So that's what I wanted to share today.
We're the media, not at large, maybe, but we're the media, and we will certainly be discussing it amongst ourselves and with other people. In fact, I'm planning a few specials for later this year to enhance and expand our conversations. Thank you very much, Michael.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And now we pass the baton to Setna of Khemet, and Setna will speak.
Could it be crook and flail if you're going to give it to me? Okay, we should have done this yesterday because 2,087 years ago, my hero was born. And yes, there are swords and sandals in her life, and that was Cleopatra VII, Theta Philopator. She was an amazing creature. Her movies, starting with Theda Bara and Claudette Colbert, and of course my Elizabeth Taylor, influenced my life greatly. Fashion, style. I was a makeup artist. If anybody wore enough makeup, it was certainly Cleopatra. She took from the temples in Egypt malachite and all the glittery things that the priestesses wore over their eyes. And Cleopatra brought them to herself for beauty and fragrance. That movie influenced my whole life. When I was a little boy, I was 5 years old when the movie came out in 1963. We were driving to the LIE to Brooklyn to meet my father's parents. And on the wall in a big theater facing the LIE was a 40-foot picture of Elizabeth Taylor on her couch. And she had Julius Caesar, Rex Harrison, and Richard Burton by her side. And she was looking like, gotcha, boys. And she had seduced the whole world. That movie influenced me to become involved with Egyptology. I had never seen a woman, I was 5 years old. I had never seen a woman that beautiful. My mom was beautiful, but she was no Liz Taylor. I don't think anybody was. But that movie influenced fashion and style and of course scandals, because the Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton had a wild, wild affair. But the sword and sandals was there too. You had many, many battles, and you had Roddy McDowell fighting with Richard Burton, and you've got all these army scenes and muscles and muscular men everywhere, you know. But it also showed the other side, the softer side of Sword and Sandals, which was the beauty. All the women in that movie were gorgeous. And Elizabeth Taylor's, I don't know, 100 costumes she wore influenced fashion to the next, oh, I don't know, 30 years. It was very interesting that that happened. Um, we were, I was all excited that that was going on. Did I lose you guys?
No, there was a glitch in the video.
Yes,
Second.
someone was trying to, hello? Someone was trying to reach me, who, will find me later on. I'm sure that was a customer of mine with my tarot and my mediumship. But all I wanted to talk about that movie because, and not only the movie, but also the woman herself. Everybody has the wrong idea about her. They only think of her as a sexy siren, which was probably true also, except that she had a great big Greek nose. She was a little heavy set. They say that the Venus de Milo was actually a statue of Cleopatra,
Oh, wow.
the one that Julius Caesar put in the courier of the Senate. And there was a statue of himself. So she was a little, how I think the word is zoftig. She wasn't skinny. She was, for those days built. Um, she had childbearing hips. And she had a nose you could put both feet into. But she knew how to use eyeliner and makeup, and she spoke forgive me, 9 languages proficiently. She was able to do things with the arts and sciences. She was an expert, as we know, of poisons. I brought this up yesterday, and one of the people that in the article I wrote, brought up the fact that she did away with her brothers and sisters. If you know anything about the Ptolemies, they were kill or be killed. They made the Borgia and the Caesars look like, you know, Glinda. They were absolutely diabolical people. They killed each other left and right. Sister killed sister, brother killed sister, killed mother, killed grandmother. The Ptolemies were a wild group. But that movie influenced me with fashion, with history. It made me want to learn about history. I didn't get to see it in full when I was a little boy because let's face it, it had an R rating. But I did see at that time the Claudette Colbert movie, which was, amazing. All of her costumes were designed to look like, and all of the costumes in the whole movie were designed to look like something out of Erte, who of course was the Art Deco genius. Her costumes, her capes, and Caesar's capes went on for weeks. They were the scenes were beautiful. Um, it was a little hard-handed. Claudette Colbert wasn't sure how to handle Cleopatra. So she talked to an expert on sex and beauty, Mae West. And Mae West taught her how to be a little more seductive and mischievous. If anybody knew how to do that, Mae West certainly did. So what did I learn by this movie? I learned about some things about Rome and Greece, and Egypt. And I began an interest that was a lifelong interest in A, Cleopatra, but B, the gods and goddesses of Egypt. And ultimately, I became Setna Come West, who is the high priest of the Pernateru temples, besides being a makeup artist. Those things, Elizabeth Taylor was my icon of beauty. I felt that with her eyes that were blue purple and her whole look that she just captured my attention for the rest of my life. I watched all her other movies. I couldn't bear to be not have somewhere have her somewhere in my house. I have many little photographs and statues and things of different things that she did. So that influenced me. I wanted to know more about the gods and goddesses of Egypt. At 5 years old, I was a theater kid. So I was reading on a sixth or seventh grade level. So I was voracious. I wanted to know everything I could know about not only Cleopatra. When I found out in Hercules, you'll love this. When I found out she was a Greek, I blew a head gasket. I wanted to know about Egypt. And here she was, the queen of Egypt, but she wasn't Egyptian. Her mother was a Macedonian, well, she was a Macedonian Greek, and her mother was, and her grandmother, by the way, both named Eleni, were from Cyprus, and they both originally came from Athens. They were Athenian. So I thought, wait a minute here, this isn't an Egyptian. But she ruled Egypt. She ruled Egypt alone for 20 years. Yes, she was there with Mark Antony and what have you, but she was the queen. Mark Antony was her consort. Julius Caesar made her queen of Egypt. Yes, she did bump off her little brothers. They planned to bump her off also. So I learned about those things because I wanted to know more, but I was stimulated by this movie, and I'm celebrating it because yesterday was her birthday, March 3rd.
Happy birthday.
So happy birthday, Cleopatra.
Thank you very much, Setna. I'll quickly share my tale as well. I'm Greek, and I was taught the stories of Hercules and the heroes when I was a child from my parents, from Greek parochial school, which I attended, and later on from the television, where they had Hercules movies and Sons of Hercules movies, and they had the Hercules cartoon. So I was totally filled with these stories, and they inspired me and they shaped me. And the myths of old, unlike what many people think, there's no one version of them. There's many different versions of them. Just like in the movies, there's many different versions of the same stories that were told in antiquity and throughout time. So I got that sense from at a young age, and I wasn't upset by differences in one account versus the other account. And they shaped me not only in my choice of exercising, because I wanted to look like Steve Reeves and Reg Park and these bodybuilders who were playing sword and sandal heroes, um, but also in my choice of, I guess, vocation. I spent my life in the human services for over 35, 40 years. I worked in human services. It's because, like Hercules and the other heroes in the movies, I wanted to fight against tyranny and injustice and make life better for people. But I wasn't into hitting things to make things get better. So I did it with communication instead and working with people directly. And I worked on a lot of social problems during that long voyage. The ancient Greeks, when they got to know another place on Earth, one of the first things they did, and the Romans continued the custom, was to equate their mythical figures with the mythical figures of the new land. So they made what you'd call now a table of correspondence to understand which gods were your gods in disguise and so forth. And the Sons of Hercules television show, which was basically a bunch of unrelated movies strung together with a theme. They also said that these are the sons of Hercules by blood or by spirit. So I liked that very much. That became very much a part of me. So my working out and my wanting to have a Herculean physique, that was very important to me. My working to help make the world a better place, that was very important to me. My spiritual journey has been very mythic and eventually became very theosophical. The mythic, of course, is understandable. The Olympians are mythical gods, and theosophy may be less understandable, but theosophy is a lot like comparative mythology and comparative religion and so forth. So they're more universal. And just like the ancients made equivalencies between the gods of theirs and the gods of the place where they found themselves, so did theosophy expand our understanding of the exoteric and the esoteric aspects of spirituality. So I did that. I also spent a lot of my life avocationally um, going after cryptids and flying saucers and haunted places. So that aspect of the myths, the monsters aspects of the myth, was very much a part of who I was and what I was doing. And these movies molded my life and inspired my life and they guided me through my life. I can't even begin to really explain the fullness of their impact on me. I can certainly understand the impact they had on both of you, and I'm just throwing in my 2 cents and the impact they had on me. Um, I changed my name legally to Hercules Invictus. My original name translates into that in Greek, but Greek is very long, difficult to pronounce names. So for a lot of my sojourn here, I got stuck with names other people gave me, and I didn't like that. So I figured, let me just make my name simpler. And it's not a thing for ego, because it's very humbling, but it's a Greek practice called an onomatitheu, which means in the name of the deity. So it just means
Oh,
my life is my prayer, my life is my sacrifice. Everything I do is dedicated to Olympus, and I embody and express the Herculean energies. So I'm Hercules here doing this. And so are you guys at this particular point in time. So anyway, that's my story. Do you want to ask each other or me any questions? So we'll start with Michael again. Michael, do you have any questions to ask him or any comments you'd like to make?
Yes, I think that that same spirit that hold of you is what took hold of me at a very young age. Well, I think I might have been. I was 18. I believe I just turned 18. I started working in a factory, and I worked I was the youngest person there, the youngest employee there, and I began to notice that even though we were represented by a union, labor was a labor shop, people were being abused. Uh, People were coming out from the office after hours and doing factory work, which they wasn't supposed to do. They weren't supposed to do. Long story short, when I began to slowly understand what a labor contract was all about, people were being fired or temporarily laid off for not working as much overtime as they felt they should, or whatever the case might have been. Management was just calling the shots and ignoring contractual rights. Once I began to see that, I became very upset. Somehow I was, and again, it was, I was not a bragging type of person. I wasn't a tough guy, but I truly believe that the spirit of Sword and Sandal, because I'm still watching them at that time, took hold of me. And I took the shop steward's job. The gentleman who had it, he really didn't want it anymore. I said, look, I'll take it. He said, you can have it. And for the next 10 years, I just turned 18. And for the next 10 years, I represented the bargaining unit. And I'm very proud of my work there. And I absolutely believe with all of my heart that heroic spirit, which was really shy and subdued in many other areas of my life, took hold of me in that area. So when you were talking about being called to help your fellow citizens in the way that you did, it immediately brought that to mind. And that was a big part of my life. It took a certain toll. I had just been married at the time, and I think, quite frankly, I put more emphasis on the labor activities I was engaged in than I did my marriage. I got married very young as well. But those heroes never stopped inspiring me. And I'd like to say one more thing I can. Another thing that the Sword and Sandal did for us is it made us become more aware of the physicality of these individuals. In other words, you would watch Steve Reeves and you would admire what he did with his body. Then you would turn around and you would see Reg Park's version of Hercules, and it was a different body, but just as impressive as this in its own way. So the point I'm making there, and then we began to get into bodybuilding. And I remember we purchased Mr. America and Muscle Builder magazine in their infancy. And I can still see those magazines on it. And we could not wait. We could not wait. So everything tied together. But we began to become more aware of physicality, the difference in physiques. Again, all because of the Sword and Sandal phenomenon of that time.
Yeah, I can identify with everything you just said. And yes, my social services career of many decades, it was so inspired by Sword and Sandal Cinema that I'd given a speech once at a college about how other people wanted to be firemen or policemen or teachers. I wanted to be a sword and sandal hero in real life. And he liked the speech so much that I was asked to repeat the speech for years at graduations and other events. So eventually I had it memorized, but that was a
That's wonderful.
and it was true. The other people wanted to do what they're doing for their reasons. My reason was I wanted to be like these people that were in the stories or that I saw on the screen.
That's really wonderful. That's exciting. And that inspiration probably would have come nowhere else had you not been, exposed, if you will, to these great films.
You're right. Sedna, how about you?
Well, I fell in love with the physiques of Hercules and all of them. And sword and sandals to me also means Sinbad and all the other heroes all over the world that I thought were amazing. Um, and also all I called them, my mother and father used to call them the Roman pictures, like the robe, Demetrius and the gladiators. Um, there were so many others that were like that, even Samson. I saw men that were tremendously built, but it also made me appreciate the male form, but it also made me appreciate storytelling. And that's what I'm well known to be. I'm a storyteller. I can write things now, but all of those stories had all those sword and sandals movie were what I would call an epic. And so they all had something to say. As Michael has often said, they all had morals. And that was another thing. They taught people what's right and wrong. If you really watched it, they didn't just start staring at the gorgeous bodies. If you watched the story and you saw the good versus the evil, and you started to learn a little bit about mythology also, in the ancient Greek way. I have a funny story too. Um, there is a very, very bad, I'm sure our friend Brian would eat this up. Hercules meets Cleopatra. And I think it was a little pornographic, but it was very, very funny. But it showed him it's based on a movie called A Night with Cleopatra. And she's on a caravan going somewhere and she meets Hercules and they have an affair. And then he goes back to Greece and she meets this guy named Mark Antony. So, but it's kind of a funny movie. It's dubbed. I think it's Italian, um, but it was just one of those things where the two worlds met. My ancient Egyptian goddess met the world's most strongest Greek hero. That was kind of fun and kind of cool.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I haven't heard of that one. I heard about the 1910 cartoon. It took me like a decade, but I finally tracked that down on DVD. So now I have something else to look for. Mark Anthony, by the way, he was considered to be an incarnation of Hercules when he was younger.
Oh, you don't want that.
By the
Mark Antony was a womanizer and a terrible drunk. And he beat up many, many of the people in ancient Rome. I don't think he was not a role model for people. He was a very, very terrible man.
He was a
Um,
dark Hercules like Commodus, but later in his life, because of his addiction to wine and debauchery, he was considered to be an incarnation of Dionysus later in
oh,
his life.
I could see that, or Bacchus. Oh, for sure, Hercules. He was a he was a very naughty guy. Um, it's been said in certain secret societies and things, Mark Antony was not the father of Cleopatra's. There were two boys and a girl. He wasn't the father of those children. She had a lover. His name was Apollodorus. I The word is Nutrites. He was her surrogate husband. So that because the Ptolemies all, they all had their brothers and sisters were their wife and husband.
Yes.
So, which they get from Isis and Osiris. And the early Egyptians did the same thing pretty much. But so that they didn't get wacko, and crazy children and all the other diseases that happen with interbreeding. They had a surrogate, a slave, male or female, depending on the pharaoh or his queen, who would be the real parent of that child. And Apollodorus is said to be the father of Cleopatra, Selene, and Alexander Helios, and Ptolemy Philadelphos. So we'll see. Julius Caesar, they say, actually was Caesarians. her first child's son. She also had a little girl that she lost, which people
Mhm.
don't know too. So she actually had five children all in all. Um, but I learned a lot. Sword and Sandals made me question a lot of things, and I always found them very interesting and a lot of fun. And you know, Hercules, I love stop action, stop motion things. So Ray Harryhausen had a lot of things going on, and people before him did. I remember a Hercules and the Hydra, although it was kind of like a tree more than a snake. And it was kind of interesting. But those things also brought my interest in filmmaking and in theater and in television more. And I loved watching I think it was every Saturday, was it 11 or 12 o'clock on Channel 9? The Mighty Sons of Hercules. I
Yes,
never,
yes.
never missed it. Never missed a day, you know.
That was just fantastic. When that first premiered, I couldn't control my enthusiasm. It was hard for me to believe that every Saturday night there would be another sword and sandal film on a regular basis. And
Yeah.
I was over the top with that.
It was the coolest thing because you had all these guys running around, great big muscles and little tiny skinny, almost tunics. They weren't
Hmm.
wearing much, were they? And the women were just as invisibly dressed. And there were always impossible situations, and these girls laying under spiky things, going, "Hercules, help me!" And of course, he eventually was able to kill 70 guards, and he would save her. And there was always an evil queen. She was going to destroy him, and in the end, he ends up destroying her. And then later on, we get fantastic Lou Ferrigno, and as you mentioned, Hercules, you'd met Sybil Danning. I met Lou at our Georgette Klinger. Oh, I don't know, post Hulk. And he's a very nice guy. And I
I,
told him,
I've met Ferrigno too, and Ray Harryhausen was on my television show and in my movie, and I
so
got to
jealous. I wish I'd met him.
personally for inspiring me through stop motion animation. I asked him if he could do it all over again, what would he do differently? And he said he'd learn how to handle money better. So I said, I think all of us can say that.
Well, I became interested in sculpture because of Ray Harryhausen, because I thought his sculptures were incredible. I particularly love the Medusa, the Hydra. In
Oh, that was great.
Sinbad, he's got a phoenix. Well, it's kind of I guess it's a griffin fighting my favorite ogre ever. And it's the coolest, he's a cyclops. And it's the coolest battle. The battle at the fountain is amazing. I love that
That
whole,
was
it's the
fantastic.
Golden Voyage of Sinbad.
Yes,
It's a
that was
great movie.
fantastic. Absolutely,
Originally, with the
absolutely.
show, one of the seasons we did, and again, these are lost now because Block Talk Radio closed down, but we had different people like I had somebody handling Egyptian movies, I had somebody else handling the biblical or Roman movies, as you call them. I used to do the Hercules movies. Brian and used to do the Sword and Sandal movies. Michelle and Nicholas used to do the Sword and Planet movies. So again, if somebody had something else they wanted to do, that was fine too. But generally, everybody had a category that they would focus on primarily. So we
I know,
covered,
I was the Egyptian guy.
Hmm.
yeah, and Michelle also was Egyptian gal.
It was something I've done all my life. I read and write hieroglyph. I can draw your name without almost with my eyes closed. Could be very messy if I do that. But I know all the characters by heart. And as I often said, there are 32 dynasties, and they all have their own slang, and they all have their own way of doing things. And if you think you have one alphabet, I've got to tell you, you don't. Every different dynasty had a different way of doing it and changing things. So it was kind of confusing. So you have to realize when you're writing all those things, where you are and who you're looking at.
We're all involved in some way or another way, each in our own way, with perpetuating these traditions in modern times. Like you're writing a lot now, in addition to all the spiritual stuff that you're doing. And you and I have been in a couple of books together. We're going to be in another book that's coming out later this year together. And I believe you wrote something about ancient Egypt, and I wrote something about ancient Greece for that.
Did you? I sent you earlier in the day a copy of something I sent to Tim and to Jean, and I don't know if you got a chance to look at it, but it
No,
was about
not yet. I'm working on some writing projects. I'm going to get to it this weekend.
Jean and Tim. I had done a show with them on Egyptian magic and witchcraft and Egyptian ritual. And we went on and on. It was, I think after a while we had 3 hours. I know that they probably edited, but what I sent you was a page that they asked me to write about Egyptian magic. And it was really fun, but this is really sharpening my writing skills.
Yes,
Yes, I do have another chapter for Tim's new book as well, and he loved it. So I know that that's going to be there too. And I've got my own books coming up. I have um, one about Ramesses, and it's a love story. It's Ramses and Nefertari, and how he loved her so much that when she passed, he built an amazing tomb for her, one of the most beautiful in all of Egypt. And I also have other things going on. There's a kind of a takeoff on Dion Fortune's The Sea Priestess. I have a woman who's a time traveler, and kind of like Quantum Leap, she jumps into the lives of different women, and she becomes those women and makes decisions in their lives. So that's kind of cool.
that is kind of
Um,
cool.
and it's kind of like a little like Stargate. And after all, that's kind of, in a way, Stargate's kind of a grandson of a lot of the sword and sandal cinema. You know, we
Yes,
had we
they have
had science
very,
fiction.
very bad opinion of the gods, though.
Don't tell me. I was absolutely enraged when I saw what they did to Ra. Ra is my father god. And I was like, how dare you? I couldn't do it.
Oh,
Um,
while you're talking about Rod, did I ever send you the clip from Horrible Histories on Cleopatra? It's a
I,
music video.
I've seen it. I've seen it. I've actually, about 5 people have sent me that. There's also a drunken history on her.
Oh,
That's
I
kind
didn't see that one.
of, but it's interesting that we know when her birthday was, and they can't find her. I mean, there's a woman, Christina something or other, that's running around the middle of Egypt near the temples of Isis, which makes sense. And she believes she kind of knows where she is. There are 3 or 4 temples that she's pretty sure might be Cleopatra's tomb. So we'll see. I think myself that she's near um, the island of Philae. But remember, that whole thing was moved as they built the Aswan Dam,
Mhm.
and whole temples are flooded and are under the Nile.
Right.
So who knows? Maybe she's become Cleopatra the mermaid.
On my ancestral land, there's sunken temples and other edifices and clay jars for if you go out for a bit. So when I was used to be a kid and we used to go there, I used to swim, and it was an underwater area, and it was one of the areas where it was rumored that Hercules came down as a god. The first place he visited as a full Olympian was Lemnos, when during the Trojan War he descended to tell Odysseus and Philoctetes uh, that he wanted Philoctetes to give him his bow so that Odysseus could take it back to Troy and win the Trojan War, because it was prophesied that he would need the bow of Hercules to do that.
And he did win the Trojan War, but he got Poseidon mad at him, and he
Yeah,
was, what was it, something like 20 years? He was kind of out to sea.
10. The Trojan War was 10 years, then another 10 years wandering around.
Well,
And
that's what I mean,
that's
and
like
poor,
when
poor Penelope.
New York and New Jersey. They're not like it's like the Hebrew people wandering 40 years in a small desert. The same thing with Troy and Greece. On a clear day on Lemnos, you could see Troy with your eyes, and it was
So,
called Ilium because it used to shine in the rising sun or the setting sun. I forget. It's been a while since I've been there.
but, he was bragging about how, he single-handedly did this. And, there was that sacrifice, Iphigenia, and you know, he annoyed Poseidon enough, and Hera was helping him, and he was kind of mad at her too. And so, poor Odysseus, he ended up. I think his child was 17 or 18 years old by the time he got back to his land, Islic. Where is his land?
Ithaca,
Ithaca, yes. And they took him in. Poor Penelope, she had all those people in her palace.
all the
And
suitors, yeah, eating up their food and their
yeah,
food and
I knew Eric Roberts when I saw the one with Armand Asante. And
uh-huh.
that was a great thing. I always thought that Eric Roberts would have made a great Hercules. He had the look, and he's a very talented actor. And of course, his sister is Julia Roberts, and we know she's incredible. So it runs in the family there.
Yeah, those are powerful stories, and they're still being told with different from different angles and with slightly different casts and crew. I have a whole bookshelf devoted just to the Voyage of the Argo, and it has books, DVDs, CDs, comic books, graphic novels, you name it. The story is told and retold. Countless children's book, countless books for adults, scholarly books, not so scholarly books, adventure books, romance novels. The story is told and retold, and it's been so since the early times, since the Bronze Age.
When I was in ninth grade, we brought up Euripides' Medea, and I played Jason. And so that drew me into, again, Ray Harryhausen's amazing Jason and the Argonauts, which is one of my favorite films ever. And it was a pleasure to play. And then when um, I guess I was 17 or 18, we had gone into Manhattan, and yeah, I just lost her. The greatest of all Greek actresses played Medea on the Broadway stage.
Irene Pappas or Medea?
Irene Pappas, yes. And she was the best Medea I'd ever seen in my life.
She was great.
She frightened me. She had that look. She was that fury in her face. And she did it, and they had the ancient Greek chorus with the masks. And it was amazing. It was like taking ancient history and bringing it back to the Broadway stage.
Even metaphysically, Aleister Crowley wrote a magical book on the Argonautica as well, and I've been using the Voyage of the Argo in guided meditations with people for decades. And the current group that I have now, we're starting the Voyage of the Argonaut soon, and we're going to use guided meditation, visualization, shamanic journeying, and all sorts of techniques to experience the voyage for ourselves and do our own version of it. And also, it's something with kids because the stories are timeless. So, with interactive storytelling, the kids love the voyage of the Argo. And sometimes the story that they get involved in lasts for years. And I remember one time we had a store in Pennsylvania, and some kids came in that used to go to my Jason and the Argonauts game at the local library, and the kid had kids, and he was telling them in the store about how he voyaged with Jason and the Argonauts and related some of the adventures, and you see the nostalgia in his eyes. So these games had a lot of impact, and they opened up the kids to Greek and Roman literature. It used to be that we had the classics being taught very much, and a classical education was part of a very advanced education, but that stopped along the way. And a lot of kids, unless they've seen Percy Jackson or read the books or entertainments like that, or through Marvel Comics or DC Comics, they're not as attuned to the old stories as we once were. Through
No,
cartoon.
it's a terrible shame. I agree with you. You know, when I saw there was a game for Stargate, what was cool was they had the boat of Ra, and they started to show the mythological things. So you saw Sekhmet, the lioness, and Bast, the cat goddess, and they were all doing things to destroy the Apep, the sky, this I'll call him the sky serpent that was just trying to eat the sun. which is very funny because it's a lot like, um, Finwë the wolf, or
Yes.
the Norse gods and goddesses, and a similar thing with the Greeks. So I was glad because it brought all that together, and you could see that those people had a brotherhood to them that I don't think we have anymore, especially with considering political. I don't want to get into it, but the political situations right now. We're all calling each other names and throwing mud at each other and screaming and yelling. And rather than, it's like the scene in My Big Fat Greek Wedding where he talks about their names and he says, my last name is Orange and their last name is Apples. And when you get down to it, we're all just fruit. I love that scene because it's just, well, it's the truth. We're all just us and we're all together. And if we just stop,
That's very true.
pointing at our differences and look at our similarities instead, I think we'd be better off.
That's why I'm glad that we're talking. Each of us comes from a different spiritual orientation. The Greco-Roman material binds us all together on one level, but we're very devoted to our own spirituality, and we can openly discuss the similarities and the differences and be open to listening to what each other has to say. And I value that a great deal, and I think the world needs more of that because we live in a polarizing time where half the world is one way, the other half is another way, and they're not tolerant of each other's thoughts and beliefs, and that is not good.
Which is why we are here, my friend. We are a voice of what is ancient and yet futuristic and yet modern, all at the same time. We are going to make a change. We are making a change for the better. We have to get people to get back together and shake hands and say, look, you're my brother, you're my sister. You might be wearing, Isis might be wearing a crown of bullhorns in his disc, but she's like Hera, you know, or Bast, who's a cat face. She's mischievous and loving, and she's like one of the muses. And they're all interlinked. And this is what I see. So, those movies that we always talk about, those people were getting along. If you go, I hate to go to Kevin Sorbo because he's my least favorite Hercules.
Same here.
But they had, a brotherhood. You had Iolaus and he walking around helping the world. And the same as the female spin-off with Xena, and Gabriel. They were all, the Gabriella, they were all trying to help the world and saying, look, here, we're heroes, but we're also people. And, here we're gonna try to make things, we're all gonna try to get along, like Jack Nicholson said in Mars Attacks. Can we all just
I have the Hercules, the young Hercules and the Xena, like 2 feet from where I'm currently sitting. I have all of them. I've seen them. And again, a service was done and these old stories were again preserved and retold to a new uh, generation in a new way. And they were on for like 7 or 8 years. There were the movies first, then you had the seasons of TV, then you had the cartoon, and then you had the video games. So the stories survived and were carried into the modern age, even though we might not have liked some of the people who played some of the characters, or they contrasted very strongly with what we believe the hero or heroine should have looked like. But still, they preserved the information, and some of the information that people laughed at and said, "Oh, that was silly," was actually based on scholarship. Like they did a couple of shows with Michael and the Archangels and things like that. And there's a lot of lore on Hercules and the Archangels, especially Michael. In Neo-Theosophical lore, they're part of the same ray, the blue ray of command and power. And also they had Jack and the Beanstalk. And there were scholarly papers comparing some of the Greek myths, including those of Hercules, to incidents in Jack and the Beanstalk. So a lot of their weirder stuff was actually backed by obscure scholarship that you really had to be into it to spot.
I look at Jack and the Beanstalk and I think about Prometheus. He's stealing gold and bringing it down to the people. And
Right.
Prometheus, of course, brought fire down to human beings. It's the same thing. I don't think that poor Jack had, a vulture eating his liver every day. But they went back and there was a big hole, which was kind of like the Grand Canyon. when the giant fell out of wherever the universe. The giant was in an area that was kind of like Olympus, if you think about it. It was a high, starry castle way in the distance somewhere that you could only get to by beanstalk.
Yes, there were those similarities. Then there was Hercules with the golden apples, the Hesperides, and there are those analogies. There were a lot of them, but I like how that weird information was also preserved, as well as the more traditional mythical information. Michael, you're a little silent. I'll bounce the ball out over to you, or hand you the scepter, whatever way you want to look at it.
Well, you both inspired me to think about one aspect of it in terms of brotherhood and getting along. It made me think about the Roman Empire for a few moments. And as brutal as they were, and they were, the Romans didn't care what religion basically that you adhered to or what you worshiped, as long as you paid Caesar what he felt you owed him.
Right.
And I mean, and we know that about Rome. One of the more positive aspects of the empire, as long as they really didn't care what you did, just as long as you paid your dues to Caesar. And you could be of any religion. There were many different faiths and many different beliefs at that. And you both inspired me to think, my God, as brutal as they were, even they could allow you to live your life and share beliefs and culture and customs with your fellow citizens, as long as you did what was right by the empire in terms of mainly taxes and finances. But even they could turn their backs as far, to a certain degree, as far as the differences between us. And listening to both of you talk about, what does it take for us to get together, I said to myself, my God, even the Romans could do a better job than we've been doing lately in terms of allowing people and just learning from each other.
Right.
And quite frankly, loving each other. It can be done. It can be done. But we let it look. It's just like Christianity, quite frankly. And I'm a Christian, but I consider myself a New Thought spiritualist.
Mhm.
But even in the denominations in Christianity, it's all about denominations. And if one thing you come away with when you try to study who Jesus really was, is that there were no denominations. In fact, when Jesus, they called him the Way. They called his followers the Way. And from what I understand, based on my own personal studies, the word Christian wasn't even used when
No, it
Jesus
wasn't.
walked through. Yeah, till much later. But Christian
That's what their
denominations have
enemies
caused,
called them.
right, it caused such a turmoil, even amongst Christian, from Christian to Christian. It's caused such a turmoil, and it's really ridiculous because so much of it is man-made rules and regulations. And I was baptized as a Catholic. I look at the Mormon Church, and there's a lot of good people involved in the Mormon Church. Very loving. They welcome you. They don't necessarily want to indoctrinate you, at least not right away. But eventually, they feel you should be baptized into their church. That's the real, that's where the real prophets are and whatever. And this is common throughout Christianity, even today. And I think it's ridiculous. It's not what Jesus brought to this world. It's not what Jesus meant to teach us. That the universe is within. God is indeed within, whatever you perceive God to be. And they've made a mess of things in many ways. So you were both describing, what's happening today, and I agree with both of you. And I was thinking that thought came almost in a dark humor, if you will, that even the Romans could do a better job at times than we have done in recent decades.
A lot of the ancient Greek important people throughout ancient Greece were not actually Greek. They were from Syria, they were from Anatolia, they were from a lot of different places. But during the age of Greece, the golden age of Greece, anybody could become Greek. If you lived in a certain area that was under Greek influence, you could be Greek if you wanted to. And history would remember you as being Greek and contributing to Greek thought. And even now, if you marry a Greek, within your kids will be Greek. So it's not that difficult to become a Greek now, even if you want to.
That's remarkable. I don't know why we can't achieve that kind of thought process in the here and now with all that we know.
Well, we could attain that among ourselves and have these free conversations, and each of us can bring that to our personal world, regardless of how big or small we draw our circles, and it'll improve things on that level, and that'll have a ripple effect.
Absolutely. I have a quick question. I don't know if this has ever been done, but the Peloponnesian Wars, were they ever brought to film? Were there any movies that were made concerning the Peloponnesian Wars between Sparta and Athens? Was that ever brought to film? Does anybody know?
I don't know, to be honest. I know Greece against Persia, both the Spartans and the Athenians, that's been brought to film a number of times. I don't quite recall about the Peloponnesian War.
I don't think they were. I know there's a lot of books. I believe there's actually an animation um, showing Pericles and some of the other peoples. And we all know about Leonidas, but that's with the Persians. So there was a lot going on there. Um, I just laugh. You know, you talk about the Romans. Did you know, Michael, that in every one of the Romans provinces, and it's you have to think back to the Bible, to Masada, that yeah, you could have your own temple as long as you also worshipped, literally worshipped Caesar. And whatever the particular Caesar, they were the problem with the Masada, with the Jerusalem was that they didn't they wouldn't do that. They would not allow a statue of a Roman emperor in their sacred synagogue, their temple, a temple, and so the Romans tore it down. And the
Did
people,
they?
a lot of people that were, you know, extremely Orthodox Jews went up to Herod's old palace, which was the Masada. And there was a whole battle of our religion against your religion. And I don't know if you know that, Michael, but that's what happened. And also, um, in every single place, for instance, in Colchester in England, there was a god, the god Lugh, who is the god of time, old King Log, okay? And they put up in that temple a statue of the Emperor Claudius, and they equated Claudius to Lugh. They made the Roman emperor their ancient Celtic god. So a lot of that happened. And people don't realize that it's not something that's taught in school. It's something you have to read about and to learn. I learned that in Robert Graves' I, Claudius back in the 1970s, which is one of my favorite series of TV that ever happened.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I did see it. I enjoyed it.
Robert Graves was a brilliant Greek person. He's the one that wrote a lot of the writings of Aesculapius, who, of course, was the one responsible for Hermes Trismegistus's writings to be brought out into the public.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you said the recognizing Caesar as a god, was that Julius Caesar? Now we know that Augustus.
I believe at that point that was many, many years later. It might have been even Henry. I'm not sure which Caesar it was. I'd have to look that up. But I know that it might even have been Tiberius.
I know Augustus. Augustus was proclaimed the
Yeah,
god.
Augustus was proclaimed the god. The Caesars were divine after their death for a while. Then they become divine while they were still alive.
The
And
only one, the only one that thought he was divine before he was dead was Caligula, and I don't think he was ever deified.
it was more of a institutional thing because the Caesar represented the god of the Roman state. So if you paid homage, it didn't matter if you actually believed that Caesar was a god. He was the god of the Roman Empire, the state. So if you paid homage to him, you didn't have to believe that he was actually a god or that he was greater than your gods. It's just you're like paying taxes. This was a way of showing respect to the state.
Well, the people of Judea didn't feel that way. And the Romans attacked them and killed many of them, millions of them.
Yes.
And those are tales that we'll wait for another day. We'll start reviewing biblical movies again. Michael, do you want to start reviewing the biblical movies?
Okay, you want to say that again?
Would you like to be our reviewer for the biblical movies? This way we can cover them as well.
Sure, I would love that.
And Setna, you want to go back to being the reviewer for the Egyptian movies?
I would love to still walk like an Egyptian, of course.
Right. I'll start reviewing the Hercules films. Good, we have the start. And also, I've invited some other spiritually minded people from different spiritualities. So within the next few months, we're going to have a forum and we're going to get together and discuss these questions and share information as well. I too am very much enamored of new thought. So that's something that ties us together. And I'm sure you're familiar with new thoughts, Edna.
Yes, indeed, I am.
And that's trickled down into our society as a law of attraction and all sorts of new age uh, practices, but they're actually very old, and they were resurrected and formalized in this country with Mary Baker Eddy in the Christian Science and Waddles and so forth. So that would be an interesting labyrinth to explore. Would anybody
I'm
like to?
looking forward to that.
Me too. Would you like to close with any thoughts or any statements, Michael?
Well, I just like to say that I think the God, whatever you perceive the mental universe to be, and there is an intelligence, there is a first cause out there, is within all of us. At the end of the day, though we don't stop to think about it when we're having conflict and we're disagreeing with our brothers and sisters. That's the reality. Just like we all have an energy body as well as a physical body. I've never stopped to acknowledge that in my lifetime often enough. My life might have been different. So I think at the end of the day, that's what we should be spending more time with, acknowledging the I am in all of us because it's there. And when we do that, I think it draws all of us closer together and get rid of all this nonsense and all this disagreement, which most of it we created to begin with anyway. So infinite mind is within all of us. I think that's what I'd like to close with.
Thank you, and please share your ministry. Both of you have wonderful ministries, so can you share a little bit about yours?
Yes, we have a very active prayer ministry going. We believe in quantum faith. We believe anyone can heal. Please handwrite your prayer request to Michael Russi, 135 Hazel Street, Clifton, New Jersey, apartment 7E, 07011. I will add you to my prayer list. We will put you in light, and I will write you back.
Thank you so very much. And Setna, would you care to close with your thoughts and share information on your ministry and how people can tap into all the wonderful things that you bring us?
We are the Pernateru Temple. We follow mostly the ways of the ancient Egyptian Neteru, which are the gods and goddesses, the pantheon of the ancient Egyptians. I teach their levels in the temple, from student all the way up to high priest and high priestess. And I will ordain people if they wish, based on their information, their knowledge, and how much they've retained. You can reach us at Facebook at Michael K. Waterman. That's my real name. You can get me at the Carnitero Temple, both on Facebook or on Instagram. You can get me at my job, which is Phone a Wizard, also on Facebook. Look for a new website coming up soon for Pernitero and for Phone a Wizard. Otherwise, you can reach me with Hercules as well.
Thank you to both of you. I enjoyed this conversation a great deal. I wish it was long, and I'm looking forward to speaking with both of you individually and collectively very soon. Onwards and upwards, I say. So thanks again, guys.
Thank you. So mote it be, and blessings to all.
And to you as well.
Blessings.